Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier One. As always, I hope you're having a good week. It's been kind of a tough one for me. This last week, I lost two people that I know. Early death. Two gentlemen, heart attacks. Both guys in their mid 50s. Far too young to go like that. Now, fortunately, it was not something that was COVID related, but these things happen. It was just the normal course of things. But unfortunately, I think this is going to keep going on. More and more people are just going to be leaving us in greater numbers. I think, and I think you all know why that is. So I don't feel like I need to go into too many details about that here, but it's the strange and terrible times that we live in. I'm doing the show on Thursday today because I have a memorial service to attend on Friday, and the timing is just not going to work out for me to record and post. So I have to get it kind of in, early this week, and so I may miss something that happens Thursday or early Friday or something like that, and it doesn't get included in the show. But if something major happens, we'll cover it next week. So anyway, this week I want to focus on Australia. I think everyone can see, what's going on there. Uh, but I'll spell it out as I see it and kind of recap things just from what I've seen, what I've read, what I've heard. And as we've alluded to on this show, it's been detailed in many posts and articles online for you to follow. Australia, sorry about that. Australia is going through uh, kind of full totalitarian response to the COVID crisis. Shutdowns, mandates, lockdowns, arresting people for being outside, arresting people for being alone in the middle of a nature preserve. Just full mass hysteria and insane levels of government response to this. Well, people in Australia, I think, are done with that. They're saying enough already. We've had it with this, and we're not going to continue to follow these dictates and these restrictions. And they're going, growing protest across the country in defiance of those lockdown rules. It's really a beautiful thing to see. There have been mass work stoppages by the truckers union. The truckers used their trucks to block major roads and highways. They stopped delivering, and they tried to get word out about what they were doing. And the Australian government countered this by suppressing every mention of the protest in the media. But then they went a step further. They even further than that. They actively patrolled social media and removed any mention of these efforts, and even threatened people for posting the information. It was very Orwellian. What's going on down there. And they've conducted the same kind of campaign against anyone promoting these marches and these protests that are, happening in cities all over the country, Queensland in particular. We saw one woman who was visited by police warning her that she can't leave her home due to the lockdowns, and anyone promoting events counter to those lockdowns on Facebook or some other social media platform can be fined or arrested. So the police drove to this woman's home and exposed themselves and her to contamination in order to tell her not to go outside because it might expose people to contamination. This is the government logic at work here for you. Also, this week we saw the trade unions marching and demonstrating outside of their union hall in one of the cities. I believe it was Queensland. And this escalated into a full-on brawl between the union reps and leadership and the actual tradesmen themselves. They were attacking their own reps and leaders because they've sold out to that local government and their state governor. This was in response to the governor recently shutting down all of their construction sites, and these men were accurately pointing out, anyone that interviewed them and talked to them, that they had worked all through 2020 with no vaccine and no problems. There was no reason that the sites weren't shuttered. They didn't have any issues. They had very small, rates of infection and very small numbers of problems. And so shuttering the construction sites now in compliance with these lockdowns is ridiculous. And it means all of these men are out of jobs. They're not making any money. And the police responded to this brawl and, fired into the crowds, both sides of it, crowd control devices. But that was not until after the craftsmen had significantly damaged the Union Hall. Okay, the running joke was that they were kind of passing around to the reporters was, who do they think is going to get to do all of those repairs? So it was very interesting to see that kind of take place. These guys definitely felt, sold out not only by their government but sold out by their union leadership, which. I'm not particularly fond of unions, so to me it's kind of a I told you so. But at least you get to see people who recognize that there's a problem and are willing to push back on it. And in the midst of all this, it seems that a higher power may have been sending some signals that the Australian government would probably be well to heed, because overnight an earthquake struck in that same area and caused damage to buildings and infrastructure. And you kind of have to wonder exactly how those damages are going to be repaired if all the tradesmen are prohibited from working. So we'll see how that plays out for them, and if that leads to any more issues, or maybe some relaxation on that capitulation by the government. But this kind of gets us to yesterday, when there was a major demonstration at the Remembrance Memorial, which is a large building erected in honor of the war dead and the veterans, particularly like the Gallipoli veterans and this kind of thing. And the demonstration was met with a significant show of force from the police, who used just indiscriminate riot control ammunition and devices to break up the demonstration. And they were chasing people down and shooting them as they ran away with these rubber baton rounds and things like that. And social media was buzzing with videos and photos of people who had been seriously wounded by these, less than lethal munitions. And this is where we are today, and I want to take a minute or two to respond to some of those posts showing those wounds from the baton rounds and the stinger balls and things like that that are being floated on Gab and other conservative sites. There's this layer of outrage that's being put on these posts that is really, I think, disingenuous at best, and maybe it's just completely, naive on the part of the people posting the messages. And people are calling this response from the police, outrageous and uncalled for, and a violent escalation of force. Well, that may be the case in Australia, because they have a place to be outraged about it, because they didn't have BLM and Antifa rioting last summer, but we did. And we had the police in the U.S. respond to those with the exact same crowd control munitions. We saw that exact same type of photos and videos being circulated around social media by BLM and Antifa, wailing and gnashing their teeth about how this was an overreaction. Well, stop that, okay? Stop whining and rending your cloths because the government responded with violence. My thought on that is duh, because that's all government has to respond with. Government is violence. All stop, okay? When it's in the hands of righteous leaders, that violence is controlled and meted out to enact justice and protect innocence, and yes, even to protect property, but it's for everybody. When it's not in the hands of good leaders, it's meted out to protect the elite and their wealth and their property, which is the case that we have right now. But being outraged or shocked by this response, It's kind of like being shocked that a shark tried to attack you while you were grabbing onto its fin. Okay, any challenge to government authority is going to be met with a response. They can't leave it be, or they will be ceding that ground and retracting their projection of power. This is who they are. This is how they think. You can, never go into any open demonstration against them and think this will all go well and no one will get hurt. If you do that, then you need to just stop and go back home to the internet, because this line of work is not for you. Okay, there is always the possibility that the government will push back on you. If they don't do that, it's only because you pose no actual threat to them, or because they have something else up their sleeve to push back on you with. They may act through a secondary actor, meaning counter protesters like Antifa or something like that. Don't ever go into these things without planning for action, for the possibility that something is going to go sideways. When things go sideways, people are likely to get hurt, and that is just has to be seen as the price that is paid. You can't be outraged by it. Well, you can, but it's not going to amount to anything unless you are prepared to escalate and push back on them. Now, last summer we saw people on the right laughing and memeing and shaming BLM and the Antifa when they showed their wounds from these baton rounds and tear gas, or everybody started calling it freedom fog in the chat rooms and the boards and stuff. Well, now it's our turn to eat those same measures, and people on the right want to whine and moan about it. Stop that shit, okay? Just nut up, okay? This is only going to get worse, people. And I recognize that people want to try and use this to delegitimize the government. That's a viable tactic, except for the fact that you made fun of the left trying to do the same thing, and it didn't work for them, and it's not going to work for you. You're not going to gain any sympathy among the normies with this. I think the crux of what I'm getting at here is the very nature of protesting. If you're going to take the route of nonviolent protest, then your goal is to get the government to escalate their use of force. No one on our side should be whining about this or complaining about it. Okay, we should be applauding it and encouraging it more. Okay, we want them to do this more, because that will escalate it even further. The end goal is for the government to respond with lethal force and cause significant, if not fatal, injuries among protesters. And that clears the table for a couple of things to happen. Either reason and sanity are restored by such a shock to the system, or it leads to the international community to cry out for it to stop and put pressure on the government to end what it's doing. Now, that's not going to happen in this case, because traditionally the West has been the one to cry out and pressure other governments when they did these things. For example, Putin in Russia is, if he issues a demand to the Australians or the US to stop crushing these protests, no one in the West is going to listen to them. So that pathway is closed off to us. We can hope that it will cause more and more people in the country who are normies to get off the fence and join in the call to end this madness, but I fear that, far too many of them are eating up the propaganda and are convinced that this is all the fault of unvaccinated people. But the other reaction is one that I think we can all guess, and that is, if the government responds with lethal force and causes casualties, then it's a declaration of war on the population, and you're justified in resisting that. Now, you may not like the frankness of that, but this is the real root of the process of nonviolent protesting. It's not really a kumbaya drum circle bullshit. It's really about getting the government to act like a fool so that one of those things happen. They're shamed into breaking, or you're justified in fighting them and escalating the violence. If you don't have this in the back of your mind when you go out to protest these things, then I don't think you're giving the logical conclusions much thought here. I don't think you have really sat down and worked out how all this goes. And we're already in a war with our government, to be honest. It's kind of a quasi-war where everyone's just shuffling around and trying to figure out what the next move is going to be, but it's war. Our leaders have given us a demand that millions of people do not intend to comply with. That demand is far enough down the road that we don't have to face it head on just yet, but we have to prepare for that time, and we have to figure out what we intend to do about it. And there's time to fight that demand in every arena, every access of the fight, but we cannot have an expectation that those avenues will be successful and do nothing to prepare for the other more likely outcome. And street protests are just part of this this response, and wounds are part of street protests. Of course, you should share the pictures of those wounds with your normie friends and tell them how terrible it is. That's totally fine. But when you're, talking amongst us and in our social media platforms, don't go around crying about it and talking about how horrible it is. Show a little spine and some resolve. This is what we can expect from a government that hates us. I think complaining about it just gives too much ammo to the leftists for them to scream, hypocrite, and delegitimize us, because they're on our platforms as well. They're going to take screenshots from Gab and screenshots from Parler and wherever else people are, posting these things and saying, oh my God, look how horrible this is. Look what Australia is doing to its citizens. They're going to take screenshots of that and they're going to put them right up next to the same screenshots of people making jokes and poking fun at the BLM people for getting shot in the face with a baton round. That's not really good optics, man. That's just, it delegitimizes us. They're going to say, you thought it was okay for people of color to be shot with these, but now you don't like it. And they have a valid point. We can't be giving them that kind of ground. Don't give them ammunition. Their memes suck. So we don't want to be doing anything that helps them make better memes. So keep an eye on Australia, because I think it's a test case. And they're taking some very specific measures there to see how people will react to them in other parts of the world. At least that's how I see it. And the good thing is I believe that the people of Australia are pushing back fiercely. WRSA had a piece posted today that Pete put up that shows some people there are already saying that peaceful protesting has failed. So we'll have to see where that goes. Again, there's only a few logical conclusions to those kind of statements and those kind of assessments of the situation. This only goes a couple of different directions. You either give in or you resist. That's it. So, well, folks, that's all I got time for today. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you next episode.